what's tattooed on my shoulder. It says, I love my brothers. You know, I've seen him in a bad space early in the morning, and if I got a drink, I'm going to give it to him. Keep him from having to go to the hospital.
You know, Frank was an interesting person. Like I say, I only knew him for a couple of years, but he was a very kind guy, and he wanted to share everything with everybody that he was around.
Road Dogg was character. He was a tough guy. He was somebody who could get really cranky and be really independent. He was somebody that was in trouble and in need a lot.
That's about the best word I could think. He was great. Inspirational, if you really must know. He had his alcohol problem and all that. He never had a mean word to say to anybody.
A good man.
My first experiences with him were when I was working as a jailer, and he would come through the jail. And he would be, one of a number of guys that we saw frequently, and also, someone who, once he sobered up a little bit, was a really, really nice guy.
Well, when he was drunk, he was indignant.
Road Dogg, well, it's kind of hard to describe other than, he lived for his drink. He liked to have a good time. Loved to tell a person if they pissed him off how he felt.
So he was a person that was essentially alone at the world.
One of the biggest issues with a guy like Frank is he didn't have the support group.
So he had no, other than the shelters, other than us, other than, to a certain extent, even the police and the hospital, he had very little support.
The condition and the experiences that we'd see with Frank were terrible, horrible things you don't like to think about in terms of people. He would at times be walking around in his, covered in his own feces. He would be covered in mud and dirt. There was one time I remember where we were, he was in his wheelchair in our dining hall, and he literally fell right out of his wheelchair onto his head and hit his head on the wall, on the floor, and cracked his head, cut a nasty gash in his head, and obviously we had to get him to the hospital.
But I also did notice, even from the time I began first seeing him, his health declined really, really rapidly. I remember seeing him without a shirt on the street one day and was really worried because he was so emaciated. He just looked terrible.
But in the end, his days were filled with pain, trouble, not being able to hardly walk. It got to the point the alcohol was the only saving grace for him.
As far as Frank goes, I didn't even know his name. I just knew him about Road Dogg. That man's cussed me, and I walk away. He's a tiny fellow. And there's all kind of rumor around here that said that, he might have been murdered or whatever. I didn't believe that for a minute. I know where they found him. I knew how he lived. The man died of alcohol poisoning. I'm sure of that. And it's a small wonder that I haven't.
The coroner told me it was natural causes.
Frank died, I believe, in the middle of the night behind a Ponderosa restaurant, a closed, abandoned Ponderosa restaurant in the middle of the night behind a dumpster. He apparently was sleeping out there, living out there, and he died alone and unassisted in the middle of the night behind a dumpster. We miss him. We miss Frank a lot. His death was a tragedy for us, and we were mourning him. And to me, it's his death is a clear sign that the services that are needed are not here yet.